15th. Napoleon out very early in the carriage. 16th. Napoleon, who had gone down to the stables at an early hour and ordered the horses to be put to himself, overtook me in the park and made me get into the carriage. Complained of his teeth. Breakfasted with him. During the meal, the subject of the commissioners was introduced. He asked if Madame Sturmer had ever seen him at Paris. I replied that she had, and was very desirous to see him again. And who prevents her? Said he. I replied that herself and her husband, as well as the rest of the commissioners, believe that you will not receive them. Who told them so? Said he. I am willing to receive them whenever they please to ask through Bertrand. I shall receive them as private characters. I never refuse to see any person when asked in a proper way, and especially I should always be glad to see a lady. It appears, said he, that your ministers have sent out a great many articles of dress for us and other things which it is supposed might be wanted. Now, if this governor was possessed of the feelings of a gentleman, he would have sent a list of them to Bertrand, stating that the English government had sent a supply of certain articles, which it was thought we might want, and that if we stood in need of them, we might order such as we pleased. But instead of acting in a manner pointed out by the rules of politeness, this jailer converts it into an insult. What probably your government intended as a civility by selecting what things he himself pleases and sending them up in a contemptuous manner without consulting us, as if he were sending alms to a set of beggars or clothing to convicts. He has indeed the heart of a hangman, for nobody but Boha would unnecessarily increase the miseries of people situated like us, already too unhappy. His hands soil everything that passed through them. See how he torments that poor lady, Madame Bertrand, by depriving her of the little society she was accustomed to, and which is necessary to her existence. It is not punishing her husband, who, if he has a book, is contented. I am astonished that he allows you or Poppleton to remain near me. He would willingly watch me himself always, were it in his power. Have you any galley slaves in England? I replied no, but that we had some convicts who were condemned to work at Portsmouth and elsewhere. Then, said he ought to have been made keeper of them. It would be exactly the office suited for him. Sir Hudson, though, came up to Longwood and had an interview with him for a short time. 17th. Napoleon called me into the garden to him, informed me that he had told the governor that he had unnecessarily increased their restrictions, that he had, without any reason, punished Madame Bertrand, that he had insulted them by his manner of sending up the articles sent for their use, that he had insulted Las Casas by telling him that he had read his letters, and by informing him that if he wanted a pair of shoes or stockings, he must first send to him. I told him, added he, that if Bertrand or Las Casas wanted to form a plot with the commissioners, which he appeared to be afraid of, that he had nothing more to do than to go to the town and make an appointment with any of them to come up inside of the alarm house and meet him. I told him that it was a disgrace to him, who was vested with authority, to insult a man like Bertrand, who was esteemed by all Europe. He then spoke about the new house and said that if he expected to remain long in St. Helena, he would wish to have it erected at the plantation house side. But, continued he, I am of opinion that as soon as the affairs of France are settled and things quiet, the English government will allow me to return to Europe and finish my days in England. I do not believe that they are foolish enough to be at the expense of 80 millions annually to keep me here, when I am no longer to be feared. I therefore am not very anxious about the house. He then spoke about escape and said that even if he were inclined to try it, there were 98 chances out of 100 against his succeeding. Notwithstanding which, continued he, this jailer imposes as many restrictions as if I had nothing more to do than to step into a boat and be off. It is true that while one lives, there is always a chance, although chained and closed in a cell and every human precaution taken, there is still a chance of escape, and the only effectual way to prevent it is to put me to death. It is only the dead who do not return. Then all uneasiness on the part of the European powers and Lord Castlereagh will cease. No more express, no more squadrons to watch me, or poor soldiers fatigued to death with pickets and guards, or harassed carrying loads up those rocks. The 18th, Sir Hudson Lowe came to Longwood and arranged some matters with General Montillon relative to the house, everything concerned with the alterations in the building put under the directions of Lieutenant Colonel Wynyard, assisted by Lieutenant Jackson of the Staff Corps, a billiard table brought up to Longwood. 19th, the drawing room of Longwood House discovered to be on fire at about 5 o'clock in the morning. It was extinguished in about half an hour by great exertions on the part of Captain Poppleton and the guard, aided by the household. It had reached within a few inches of the upper flooring, which was formed of a double boarding. Had this fire caught, it would have been nearly impossible to have saved the building, as there is no water at Longwood. 20th, some curtains for the Emperor's bed sent up to me by Sir Thomas Reed. 22nd, dined in camp on occasion of the anniversary of the Battle of Salamanca. Present, His Excellency and staff, heads of department, etc. 24th, the Admiral sent up a lieutenant and a party of seamen to pitch a tent, formed of a lower studding sail, as no shade was afforded by the trees at Longwood. Colonel Mounsell of the 53rd asked me to exert myself in order to procure, through Count Bertrand, for Dr. Ward, who had been 18 years in India, an interview with Napoleon. Count Bertrand accordingly made the application to the Emperor, who replied that Dr. Ward must apply in person to Count Bertrand. 25th, told Napoleon that the Griffin had arrived from England the night before and had brought the news of the condemnation of General Bertrand to death. Though absent, he appeared for a moment lost in astonishment and much concerned, but recollecting himself, observed that by the laws of France a man accused of a capital offense might be tried and condemned to death par contumacy, but that they could not act upon such a sentence, that the individual must be tried again and be actually present, that if Bertrand were now in France, he would be acquitted, as Drouot had been. He expressed, however, much sorrow at it on account of the effect which it might probably produce upon Madame Bertrand. In revolutions, continued he, everything is forgotten. The benefits you conferred today are forgotten tomorrow. The side once changed, gratitude, friendship, parentage, every tie vanishes, and all sought for is self-interest. 26th. Saw Napoleon at his toilette. While dressing, he is attended by Marchand, Saint-Denis, and Navarre. One of the latter holds a looking-glass before him, and the other the necessary implements for shaving, while Marchand is in waiting to hand his clothes, eau de cologne water. When he has gone over to one side of his face with the razor, he asks Saint-Denis or Navarre, "Is it done?" And after receiving an answer, commences on the other. After he has finished, the glass is held before him to the light, and he examines whether he has removed every portion of his beard. If he perceives or feels that any remains, he sometimes lays hold of one of them by the ear, or gives them a gentle slap on the cheek in a good-humored manner, crying, "Ah, coquin, why did you tell me it was done?" This probably has given rise to the report of his having been in the habit of beating and otherwise ill-treating his domestics. He then washes with water, in which some eau de cologne has been mingled, a little of which he also sprinkles over his person, very carefully picks and cleans his teeth, frequently has himself rubbed with a fresh brush, changes his linen and flannel waistcoat and dresses in white kerseymere or brown nankeen breeches, white waistcoat, silk stockings, shoes, and gold buckles, and a green single-breasted coat with white buttons, black stock with none of the white shirt collar appearing above it, and a three-cornered small cocked hat with a little tri-collared cockade. When dressed, he always wears the cordon and Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor. When he has put on his coat, a little bonbonniere, a box of sweetmeats, his snuff box, and handkerchief scented with eau de cologne are handed to him by Marchand, and he leaves the chamber. Napoleon complained of a slight pain in his right side. I advised him to get it well rubbed with eau de cologne and flannel, and also suggested a dose of physic. At this last, he laughed and gave me a friendly slap on the cheek. He asked the causes of the liver complaint, now very prevalent on the island. I enumerated several, and amongst others, drunkenness and hot climates. If, said he, drunkenness be the cause, I ought never to have it. 27th, Colonel Keating, late governor of the Isle of Bourbon, had an interview with Napoleon, which lasted for nearly an hour. 28th, informed by Cipriani that in the beginning of 1815 he had been sent from Elba to Leghorn to purchase 100,000 francs worth of furniture for Napoleon's palace. During his stay, he became very intimate with a person named Blank, who had a blank at Vienna, from whom a private intimation was sent to him that it was the determination of the Congress of Vienna to send the emperor to St. Helena, and Evan had sent him a paper containing the substance of the agreement, a copy of which he gave to Cipriani, who departed instantly for Elba to communicate the information he had received to the emperor. This with the confirmation which he afterwards received from Monsieur Blank, A. Blank, and M. Blank at Vienna, contributed to determine Napoleon to attempt the recovery of his throne. Accompanied Napoleon, in his evening drive, informed him that Sir Thomas Reed had begged me to acquaint him that the Russian commissioner had taken no part in the official note addressed to the governor and containing a request to see him. Napoleon. He observed that if they wished to see him, they had taken very bad measures, as all the powers of Europe should not induce him to receive them as official characters. They might break open the door or level a house down and find him. He then observed that a book relative to his last reign in France had been lately sent out by the author, an Englishman, to Sir Hudson Lowe, with a request that it should be delivered to him. On the back was inscribed in letters of gold, "To the Emperor Napoleon," or "To the Great Napoleon." "Now," continued he, "this Galeriano would not allow the book to be sent to me because it had Emperor Napoleon written upon it, because he thought that it would give me some pleasure to see that all men were not like him, and that I was esteemed by some of his nation. I did not believe that a man could be so low and vile. Since the arrival of Sir Hudson, though, there has been a great alteration in the number of newspapers sent to Longwood. Instead of receiving, as heretofore, a regular series of some papers, as well as many detached ones, only a few irregular numbers of the Times have arrived, and occasionally a courier. This has caused great anxiety at Longwood to those who have relations in France, and given much displeasure to Napoleon, to whom Sir George Cockburn frequently sent up papers before perusing them himself. August 2nd, made a complaint to the purveyors that no vegetables except potatoes had been sent up for 3 days, and requested that if he was not permitted to furnish any more, my letter might be transmitted to Major Gouverneur. 3rd, received an answer from Mr. Fowler, clerk to the purveyors, informing me that they had ordered to send no more vegetables, which they had been informed by Major G. were in future to be furnished from the Honorable Company's garden. Colonel Monsell, presented this day by Sir George Bingham. Napoleon conversed for a short time with the latter. 5th, Sir Hudson Lowe came to Longwood, and calling me aside in a mysterious manner, asked if I thought that General Bonaparte would take it well if he invited him to come to a ball at Plantation House on the Prince Regent's birthday. I replied that under all circumstances, I thought it was probable that he would look upon it as an insult, especially if made to General Bonaparte. His Excellency remarked that he would avoid that by asking him in person. I said that I would recommend him to consult Count Bertrand on the subject, which he said he would do. He then referred to a prior conversation and informed me that he was of opinion my salary ought to be augmented to 500,000 per annum, and that he would certainly write to Lord Bathurst and recommend it. After this, he spoke about Mr. Hobhouse's book, observed that he could not send it to Longwood, as it had not been forwarded through the channel of the Secretary of State. Moreover, that Lord Castlereagh was extremely ill spoken of, and that he had no idea of allowing General Bonaparte to read a book in which a British minister was treated in such a manner, or even to know that a work containing such reflections could be published in England. I ventured to observe to His Excellency that Napoleon was very desirous to see the book, and that he could not confer a much greater favor than to send it up. Sir Hudson replied that Mr. Hobhouse, in the letter which accompanied it, had permitted him to place it in his own liberty if he did not think himself authorized to send it to its original destination. 6. Napoleon again entered on the subject of the book, the detention of which by the governor he declared to be illegal, and that even if he were a prisoner under a sentence of death, the governor's conduct would not be justifiable in detaining a printed and published book in which there was no secret correspondence or treason, because there were some bêtises in it. By bêtises, he meant the inscription addressed to him. A lieutenant, 2 midshipmen, and a party of seamen employed in repairing the tent, which had suffered materially in the late bad weather. Napoleon went up and conversed for a short time with the midshipmen, one of whom, by a strange coincidence, happened to be the son of Mr. Drake, notorious for his conduct at Munich. 16. Sir Hudson Lowe came up while Napoleon was at breakfast in the tent, in order to see him, but did not succeed. The 12th. Grand Field Day at camp, in honor of the Prince Regent, explained to him that in all their colonies His Royal Highness's birthday was celebrated. Ready, said he, naturally. Asked me if I were asked to dine with the governor. I replied no, but that I was asked to the ball in the evening. 14th. Napoleon went out to ride this morning for the first time for 8 weeks. Informed me that he had so severe a headache that he had determined to try the effect of a little exercise. But, continued he, the limits are so circumscribed that I cannot ride for more than an hour, and in order to do me any good, I should ride very hard for 3 or 4. Here has been, continued he, that Sicilian spy. I would have remained in the tent an hour longer if I had not been informed of his arrival. It disgusts me to the soul to see him. He is perpetually unquiet and appears always in a passion with somebody, or uneasy, as if something tormented his conscience, and that he was anxious to run away from himself.